What's up, everybody? This is DH Thorne. I want to preface this video by explaining to you that I have the utmost respect for practices around the world, whether they respect me or not. Your faith, your religion, your spirituality, although I am opposed to dogmatic religious thinking, I respect you and your beliefs. I don't try to judge them harshly, at least not you for practicing them, even if I think that certain things are wrong or misinterpretations of things. I am not here to judge you or to preach to you or convert you or anything really like that. But this video is on the subject of closed practices. Now, this is a bit of a hot button issue, and I want to make it perfectly clear that I really don't have a dog in this hunt. I've never been interested in any of the practices that are called closed by whoever's saying it. My personal perspective, well, it's nuanced. First and foremost, any practice that claims to be closed based upon the color of my skin or my ancestry or land of origin or any of that stuff alone, I'm really not interested in. I don't really feel like there's anything there for me. You never really have to worry about me practicing that because I think it's closed-minded and monolithic and dogmatic by nature. It's really not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in higher truth, which is obvious. It's something you don't have to be taught by some priest or priestess. It's not something that's gate-kept. Anyone can discover the truths that I'm after. You don't need specific practices to find them. You don't have to get permission from some guru or teacher or whatever before you embark upon a journey of, well, self-discovery, really. The truth and the seeker are one. You know, this is what we're trying to find out. You are the unbound divine. And anyone who would tell you that you have to be of a certain race in particular to gain that knowledge, they have nothing for me. They literally have no, there's no truth there for me. Now, that sounds really harsh, but I'm mainly speaking to those who base it upon race. Things like race, the color of someone's skin, and this is why you're not allowed to practice certain things. However, like I said, there's nuance here, and I want to make the point that for some people and for certain practices, we are talking about what are considered to be the ancestral, well, literally the ancestors of specific people, or a specific culture or a specific group of people. And this makes it a little bit more tricky, in my opinion, simply because, you know, how would I feel if someone across the world said that they have a right to work with the ancestral spirit of my grandfather and to call my grandfather up and work with him to curse somebody, for example? Well, what if I know that my grandfather would never be into that? That's not the type of being that he is, right? How would I feel about that? Well, generally from my sort of Zen position, I probably wouldn't care. I wouldn't see much harm either way. I would think it's kind of silly, but I would understand why the average person might not be as okay with that. And if you are seeking to practice magic or root work or whatever, utilizing someone's native ancestral spirits, I believe that you do, at the very least, need to consider. I'm not telling you what to do or not do, but you need to consider the level and element of respect that should go into that, you know? The Loa, if they are considered the ancestors of a certain group of people, then respect should be paid to that belief, if for no other reason than just out of courtesy. However, to say that some practice is closed in the broad sense, to say that no one can practice Norse paganism unless they are Norse or at least European, I don't think you can make that argument. And I don't think you make that argument for literally any other spiritual practice. I'm not being a colonizer by saying this. I just don't think that that really holds water, because sooner or later you're going to find a priest or priestess or whatever who is going to say that, you know what, this doesn't apply and anyone can practice this so long as they do it with respect. Who do we listen to? Do we only listen to the people who are butthurt about it, who say that you're offending my ancestors by doing this? Or do we listen to the people who want to open it? Which group should we listen to? And if you say that we can only listen to the ones who get upset about it, well, what if there's just one person who's upset about it? How many people does it require? Does it require a majority? Does it require a large minority? Who gets to decide whether a system is closed or not? Who decides that? Again, I don't have a dog in this hunt. I have no interest in practicing any tradition where there is a prominent group of people who claim that it should be closed based upon this. If that is the criteria for whether or not I'm allowed to practice it, then they do not contain any wisdom that I seek. There's literally nothing there that I want. I can look at it from afar. There's plenty of resources online to at least give me the broad overview of what they're practicing. And I don't have to practice it. I can look at it and see what is of value, because like I said, I'm interested in higher truth. I'm not interested in working with your ancestors per se. That's not really what I'm about. I don't see that as important. So that's never going to be a problem for me. You're never going to have me go, well, I'm going to start practicing X, Y, or Z. I don't know, insert your clothes practice here. You're never going to have me do that and start to, claim that I have a right to just because. It's just nothing. I'm just not interested in it. Right. So even if I literally have no reason to argue it, because it's not my thing. And I would encourage anybody to think in a similar fashion. If there is a large predominant contingent vocal community that says they don't want you, there's probably nothing there for you. Truly, and at least nothing of real higher value. It's not the same as higher truth. Higher truth is obvious. It requires some work to see, of course, sometimes, but higher truth is obvious and is not limited to your race or your culture. Now, there are more nuances, of course. If you are not from a specific culture, you may not understand the nuances of the practice. Or worse, you might be seeking to capitalize, and I'm not saying I'm anti-capitalistic, mind you, but you may be seeking to capitalize upon these things because, well, you're not really interested in practicing them with respect. You're interested in profiting on them or turning them into things to whatever, art, sell, whatever. You're looking to twist them into something sellable, perhaps. So, for example, when people go into some of magical traditions, so like Harry Potter is a good example, in my opinion. It's a broad one. Harry Potter takes some magical principles and lore and turns them into stories for children. And this can cloud and confuse a lot of people about those practices. I'm not offended by it. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm simply saying that I can understand why some people would oppose it. Why some people would say, hey, that's my religion, not a costume, for example. That doesn't mean that that's always the truth. It doesn't mean that it's always something that will stop me. I don't believe in cultural appropriation as a general concept. I'm not saying that people can't be disrespectful about it and maybe shouldn't do that. You're never going to catch me wearing some like Indian headdress or something. Certainly not in a serious fashion. I'm never going to say, hey, I'm a shaman or I'm a tribal elder or some other nonsense. You're never going to hear that out of me. It's never going to happen. Not interested. I'm not interested in copying somebody else's religion as an adornment to make myself feel better, And what I'm interested are things that are, like I said, obvious and public, and the truth is usually impossible to hide. To the determined seeker, it's always there. So there's a lot of nuance, and this may not be entirely popular with some people. It's kind of interesting because a lot of this has turned into woke politics in mystical, magical, occult, new age stuff. So once upon a time, there was this feeling that spirituality was something that should be available to everybody, regardless of race, religion, whatever, that there should be no secrets in spirituality. This led to an explosion of occult information becoming public. And this was a good time to be into these things, because it was like everyone was rediscovering things, and it was great. But now, because of the progression of woke, socio-political bullshit, now there is a new way to virtue signal, and a new way to act like a victim, and a new way to just sort of divide everybody based on identity-oriented issues. Again, I don't mean to minimize or diminish actual wrongdoing. That's not my argument. Clearly, I don't like that. I'm not interested in polluting a tradition just to westernize it or to make it something that I can access. I'm not interested in that. If I met, for example, I don't know what you would call them, someone who practices voodoo or voodooan, or someone who's into Norse paganism or whatever semi or completely closed, tradition we're talking about. If I encountered someone like that, and I'm not saying I wouldn't have questions. I'm not saying I wouldn't ask them things and compare notes. But unless they invited me to practice with them, I probably wouldn't. I wouldn't find it interesting. It's not for me, I'm not practicing a religion, and I'm not here to practice someone else's tradition. I'm here to discover the truth. And like I said, that's not hard to see. You don't have to learn any gate-kept secrets to find the truth. The truth is never gate-kept. The methodology to achieve the truth, however, might be. And this is where we get on to like part 2A of this video, which is gatekeeping in general. Gatekeeping in general, I don't like it. I don't believe that information should be, withheld. Consider me a Promethean type, a Luciferian type. I like to just give information and let people do with it what they can. Consider it, survival of the fittest for the mind. If I give you information and you can't deal with it, or you can't understand it, or you can't use it responsibly, well, that's just nature taking care of itself, in my opinion. Whatever repercussions happen are part and parcel of your growth. And generally, higher truth is perfectly safe. There's really nothing dangerous about higher truth. But I do understand a certain need for occulting things and for keeping certain things secret, especially about yourself, but even about practices. There are certain things that seem to have more potency when they are kept under wraps to some degree. I don't consider that necessarily gatekeeping. It may seem like it, and certainly sometimes it is. But gatekeeping, as a general rule, the way I understand the term, is more of an ego trap than it is a practical, pragmatic thing. There are practical and pragmatic reasons to keep things occulted, even practices, even things that maybe should be free. But there may be a practical or pragmatic reason not to share them with everybody. For example, a good deal of magic that is done on the left-hand path involves profane and heretical things. We're talking about using blood in rituals, sometimes animal sacrifice. Not that I condone that. I don't practice that. But if I did, you wouldn't know, because I wouldn't talk about it. There are things that shouldn't necessarily be made public. There are things that should be occulted, and only people who are trusted should be allowed to be involved. And that I completely understand. So as you see, it's a nuanced thing. You can't say that you are for gatekeeping, against gatekeeping, for closed practices, against closed practices. It's really not that simple, is it? There's nuances that filter through the whole thing that mean that you really should examine it on a case-by-case and person-by-person level. If there was a priest or priestess of a specific path that wanted to initiate me into their path, and I was willing to do it, I'll do it. Don't care if someone says it's closed or not. I have permission from this person. As far as I'm concerned, I'm practicing their tradition, not yours. Seems pretty reasonable to me. Now, like I said, there are things that probably shouldn't be, at least not flaunted in public. There are practices that shouldn't just be made available to everybody because there are some dangers involved. Now, I speak of practices, not truths. The truths gained from those practices, I feel like it's my responsibility whenever I discover them to give them reasonably to everybody. I don't hold any of that back. If I work with the spirit, I keep what's mine to myself, but what is safe for the general public, I give away. If I write a book, yes, I charge for it, but I'm charging for the labor of writing it, not the information it contains. I'm charging for the amount of effort that I had to go to obtain that knowledge. The knowledge itself is free, and I give it away all the time in my videos. People who've read my books will say, hey, while maybe I'm not as thorough as I am in my books, I don't keep any secrets from my videos. I don't sit there and say, oh, you can only find out how to do tarot readings from my books. That's ridiculous. I don't believe in that. But there are certain practices that I have that are mine and will not be shared. And if I share them, they're going to be shared on condition of secrecy. That is because they may not be understood by the general public. They might not even be that bad. They just might be something that just wouldn't be understood by everybody. You see, I already risk a lot just doing this. Just being associated with some people, I take a lot of flack. Just not being mean to E.A. Quetting gets me a lot of shit. Well, maybe not a lot, but gets me some shit. Just talking about these things has people look at me a certain way, talking about my politics. So I'm no stranger to the slings and arrows of criticism. Don't give a fuck about that. But there's always going to be something I keep close to my chest. I am very sincere and I'm very open, but that doesn't mean I don't have my own personal private things. And I say this because much of the gatekeeping in the spiritual community is born out of that. Their family secrets, their family practices, their practices done by a certain organization that for whatever reason may not be understood unless you are initiated into them properly. So, for example, a good example, maybe not something that should be secret, but a good example of something that gets misunderstood, things like the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, things like the meaning of pentagrams themselves, or virtually half the things that we do as magicians are grossly misunderstood by the general public. If they had been introduced to them through practice and research the way the rest of us gained it, some people have to be self-taught, admittedly, like myself. If they had done the work to understand it, they wouldn't be misappropriating it or using it in ways or judging us for it. So I want to leave by repeating a few things. Number one, I am not here to barge my way in to other people's religions, traditions, practices, or whatever. I am not interested in those things because I generally see them as dogmatic. I generally see them as superstitious. And if they base whether or not I am allowed to know them based on the complexion and color and whatever of my flesh, then I hate to tell you, I'm way beyond you. And that may be arrogant of me, but I'm not interested in you. You have nothing to worry about. I see that as backward. I see that as just totally backwards. There's nothing that you could teach me other than what not to do. And I'm not interested in that. That doesn't mean that your tradition is bad. It's probably very good. Maybe, I'm not trying to disrespect your spirits. I'm not trying to disrespect your practices. I am disrespecting the idea that my skin color or ancestry has anything to do with it. Beyond, of course, Are we talking about your immediate ancestors? Are we talking about your grandfather, your grandmother, your great-great-great-grandmother, some tribal elder that from antiquity you guys, whatever people you're from believe in or whatever? I'm not interested in that anyway. I've never been interested in that. I'm not here to quibble over that. Doesn't bother me. That belongs to you. That's fine if you want to say that. However, there's probably other people that would disagree with you, that would say that it is available to others, so long as they're respectful. I know I'd be like that if someone said, hey, I want to work with your grandfather. I probably wouldn't let you, but if someone I trusted said, hey, I want to learn from your grandfather's spirit, if I knew how to help you contact it, I would maybe tell you, maybe. But that's because it's my ancestor. And if that's how you feel, in other words, if it's not because of my race is what I'm trying to get at. If it's not because of my race, but because I'm from a different bloodline from you, and you believe that only people who have your bloodline have a connection to that spirit, and that's what you believe, hey, you know what? I'm certainly not going to approach you to try to get that information anyway. I'm not interested in it. I don't feel a connection to it, for one thing. So I'm not trying to disrespect anybody, except the people who go based on race and this woke idea that white people colonize and that's why they shouldn't be allowed, and this other racist nonsense. That to me is not a valid argument. So in other words, you've got a whole lot of other valid arguments that you could use that are reasonable, but the race one is not. Just saying that because someone's white, that it is cut off, that it is closed to them, or vice versa. Just saying that because it's Norse, that black people or Spanish people or whatever can't access it just because of that. I don't think that holds any rational water whatsoever. So what I would say is, in my personal opinion, and it is just my opinion, if you are seeking to learn from these closed systems, you need to have a great deal of respect for them and the people who practice them. And you really should seek out a qualified teacher, if for no other reason than to make sure that you're being respectful of the source material, to make sure that the traditions are maintained. Don't just buy some book on voodoo from even an author I might respect, who says, oh, you can do this because I wrote it. If you're looking for knowledge, knowledge is free to everybody. But if you're looking to practice it personally, I would seek out someone who can at the very least initiate you properly. I'm not saying it's forbidden. I'm not doing that. But I am saying that from a respectful perspective, treating people how I'd want to be treated. It's not because it's impossible. It's not because you shouldn't learn those things. I don't think the information in these practices are hidden. I think you can find out most of what you would need to know if you just look in the right places. It's really not hard to find the secrets of virtually any secret order. They're out there if you know where to look. At least the good ones, at least most of it. Rather, to engage in the practice in a way that is respectful to the tradition of the practice, I think that there are at least concessions that should be made personally. For example, take martial arts. I can claim to be a student of the Japanese sword, but I cannot claim to be a student of a specific style of swordsmanship, or to claim that I am in any way practicing, what would be considered traditional Japanese swordsmanship. If anything, I am using that stuff and being an eclectic swordsman in general, and some Japanese influence might be there. But I am not going to say that I am a master of kenjutsu. Even if I could kick your ass with a sword using Japanese style, doesn't mean I'm a master of kenjutsu. Did I learn that from a master of kenjutsu? If not, I'm a master swordsman, but I'm not a master of kenjutsu. You understand? Sort of like I can't claim to be a master of Kung Fu. However, I learned Kung Fu to a certain degree in my own martial arts that I studied, my own MMA that I studied under several different schools. We'll just leave it at that because I don't want to be too direct. But I wouldn't say that I'm a master of Kung Fu, though I might use a Kung Fu technique. You understand? So let's all step back, pull our own egos out of our own ego's asses, so to speak. You know, the head of our ego in the ass of our ego. Let's pull our heads out of our asses for a moment. Let's have respect for traditions. Let's remember that truth is impossible to keep hidden. Truth wants to be out. That there are nuanced reasons why people would want their traditions to be kept secret or to themselves, and we should respect that, at least in some capacity. We should respect that. And let's remember that if people really are backwards enough to think that race is a valid reason to withhold information, then whatever they have to teach is probably below you. It's probably not worth your time. If their information was so good and they still think that way, they still have a lot more shadow work to do, for one thing. Personally, I think that. Anyway, guys, I know not everyone's going to agree with every nuance of this thing, so try not to be offended if you don't agree with everything I'm saying. Instead, try to approach it with an open mind and understand that I have an open mind. I'm not necessarily going to argue with you if you disagree, but feel free to disagree in the comments or agree in the comments. That's fine. Get a respectful conversation going. Respect goes a long, long fucking way. And I like to lead with respect, but I will respond to disrespect with blocking and disrespect of my own. So I'm not a doormat. So, all right, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Until next time, this is DH Thorne. Check out the links in the description. If you want to support me, make sure to like, share, and subscribe this video responsibly. Don't send this out there just to get haters from Christian land on me or whatever. But have fun with this information, and I hope it made you think a little bit. Until next time, mind the shadows.